Hello, and welcome to Starting Points, where one thing leads to another. I have a couple of examples for you. Last time I was looking at dogs in the Arctic and how they were an important source of transportation, pulling sleds in the winter, things like that. And one of the examples was this book, Race Against Death, bringing of serum to Nome, Alaska, using dog sleds. It's a true story by Seymour Reit. Now, two places one could go. One could read more stories about dog teams and things like that. Another place would be to read other books by Seymour Reit, and here's one of his. I really found this fascinating because I knew nothing about it, virtually nothing about it. I at first thought I would tell you some of the things that I didn't know about it, but in doing so, I felt, Larry, you'd spoil the story a bit for them. Let them find this out. This is a historical fiction, but based on, that's what historical fiction is, based on real events, real things that happened. And it involves the fact that the American troops under George Washington that were around, made their camp around Boston. Boston has a blockade of British ships in the harbor. There's no exchange of gunfire or anything back and forth, which is just as well, because all those ships have cannons, and the American forces have no cannons. In fact, they have so little gunpowder that 4, 5, 6 shots maybe, and then person couldn't use the rifle again. Now, there is a solution to those deficiencies. There are cannons, there are gunpowder, and there's lead from melting into making bullets, but it's at Fort Ticonderoga, which is a fort that the French had built between Lake Champlain to the north and Lake George in the south. That fort has been taken by Benedict Arnold, Benedict Arnold, in Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys of Vermont. Small force, but the fort had not been, was underprotected. And what did they discover? They discover it's just a warehouse for cannons and powder and lead. But how to get it there? So this is a story that I found eye-opening. Now, Seymour Reit wrote a book called Behind Rebel Lines, The Incredible Story of Emma Edmonds, Civil War Spy. So, Civil War. I've not read it, but I have read about her. I've read about her in this book, In the Line of Fire, 8 Women War Spies by George Sullivan. And one of the 8 is Emma Edmonds, and one of the 8 was Lydia Darrow, who I knew nothing about. She was helped get information to George Washington. So, American Revolution, Civil War, and other instances. This is 4 people. 2 are women, including Lydia Darrow, and 2 men. and it's called Secret Missions, Four True Life Stories by Ellen Levine. Now, one of probably the biggest stories was a story about the shot heard round the world. And Howard Fast wrote April Morning about April the 19th, 1775, when there was actual physical shooting from both sides. And it's quite a book. And you can go from that to reading, as I did anyway, other books by Howard Fast. So that's one way. Now, Arundel. Now I mention it, I've shown you this book, but I mention it again because it involves Benedict Arnold, who took a group of men, led a group of men up through Maine to attack Quebec City, which had originally been French, but the English had defeated the French and was now controlled by the British. And it's quite an adventure story. And one could go on and read other books by him, like Boone Allen, which I'll say more about when we get to Allen's. Captain Caution, Sea Story, but many books, and he's a great historical fiction writer, researcher and writer. Or one could look at something more about Benedict Arnold. There's Finishing Becca. This is a novel by Anne Rinaldi, and I've mentioned her before. In this book, she looks at a story about Peggy Shippen and Benedict Arnold. Now, Peggy Shippen lived in Philadelphia, and her family were quite well off. And she had a sense that she was privileged. And so that aspect of it happens to come into play when she meets Benedict Arnold. And she sets her sights to gain his affection. It's quite a story. Now, at the same time that this is going on in Philadelphia, this story about Rebecca's War that I showed you before by Anne Finlayson was going on. And I got thinking about it. It was almost like this Rebecca is almost like Cinderella. She doesn't have privilege, consequently, she's not afraid to get her hands dirty and do things that might be dangerous to help others. Then, lo and behold, I read all three of these books together. The Traitor, The Case of Benedict Arnold, by Jean Fritz. Now, most of her biographies are fairly short, but this one's a full-length historical novel, and it's dealing with what happens and how did he fall from being the hero of the start of the war to being a traitor. And fascinating character study. This is by Jean Fritz. It's a novel that about, again, another event I knew nothing about. I wonder how many more of those sorts of, well, there's hundreds of them out there. There were battles all up and down the seaboard, and I don't know about all those things. And this was not a battle where anyone's life was lost. It happened a couple of months before April morning. And it happened in Salem. And she's done the research about it based on a real incident, and then writes fiction. Writes about what it is that, how maybe the British tactic of punishing the colonies or sending the redcoats in to live in your city, very visible, and might have backfired. Might have it caused people who were loyal to reassess their how they felt. This book I've shown you as well, and mentioned something, and I think read something from it as well, maybe. Barbara Tushman's The March of Folly. Several different examples she's chosen over time, which is fascinating in itself. But there's one little quote in here about how things were handled by the British. Confronted by menace, or what is perceived as menace, governments will usually attempt to smash it. And that seemed to be the British point of view. Rarely to examine it, understand it, define it. And I think the time before I mentioned it, the British had none of these lords had bothered to go over and actually talk to the colonists to see what they're doing, what they've accomplished, and what a great job, what a swell job they've done, and how, boys, we sure want to keep them. What we would gain by a little tax might actually cost us this? Oh, that's not even to be considered. Well, thanks for joining me. Until next time, bye for now.